Hey, so I'm doing a quick demo on Majesty modding. For this, I'm in the regular Steam library. I'm not sure if you have to subscribe to the beta or not, but there is a SDK folder that you can get to, and that a few years ago, one of the devs came back and added modding and Steam multiplayer support and such. Where did I go? So in here, this is at the this has the editor as well as a great deal of information. You're not able to access everything for modding, so you have to get kind of hacky if you want to mess with UI and a few other things you'll find out as you keep tinkering with this. But if you go into here, you can see tons and tons and tons of information about how everything in the game works, or most of the things in the game works. Like if you wanted to build a building, this is how a Goblin Watch Tower works, and then this is all the things that happen in order for that to happen. I went in here and dug around for a couple example files that are useful, or just like a good demo because they're not too complicated, because a lot of this stuff ends up being one function linked to another function linked to another function. I recommend using some sort of IDE to find information. I'm using PyCharm because I have it anyway, and then you just add in the directory. So if I was like, oh, how do embassies work? Well, I can go search up embassy, and then you can read up all the different places where that's referenced and linked together. For example, on here I can see that the embassies range from, so this is in milliseconds, 30 seconds to 50 seconds, so anywhere in that amount of time. And anything you could ever want is in here. So here is a pretty useful file, which is globals, which is like global variables. And this just has a ton of information locked away in here. You can see really anything you wanted. What I was going to use is a couple functions. Actually, I'll get back to that in a second. So when we're working with this, you generally want to copy over, or the way I like to do it is not working in these files that come from Steam, because if you mess with something in here and you break something and you want to go back, you might have to do like a repair game files or something like that, and it's just kind of a mess. You want to take whatever files you want to work with, copy them to whatever folder you want to work in. There's like a default in like your regular documents folder, clicking around somewhere. So I went and copied over a few files just to stay a little organized. I made them and put them in different folders. I took one about monster data, which has various AI, like whether something's immune to poisoning and all sorts of stuff. I got one of those. I got one from something about the embassy and how that works, and some information in the global variables, and I'll tinker with all these things. Something I'd recommend with modding is to go into your, if you can find this folder, mine's in Documents, My Games, Majesty HD. There's all sorts of stuff in here which you can actually find, and it's pretty handy, like random freestyle setups and stuff. But this one is preferences, and I don't think you can get to these always or anywhere else. But you can find some stuff like, what's your resolution for the game? Do you want to play the intro video? I play in windowed mode so that when I click off the game, it doesn't freak out and have trouble clicking back in. But what I recommend is turning on the GPL debugger. You can turn on the window too, but it's a little harder to use, and I don't typically use it. But the GPL debugger is a super useful tool once you're in game, and you can like pause and check on your numbers and all sorts of useful things. It's pretty sturdy, and it helps a ton for trying to tinker with this stuff. So from here, I copied over a few files. I'm going to go back to my Steam. Where the heck are we? Yeah, I'm going to my Steam SDK folder again. I'm going to open up the editor. Open on the other monitor. So here's where it opens up to. I'm going to do a new mod. New quests are fairly similar. There's some different details, and there's like a whole UI for that. And there's another video where someone's gone into detail a little bit more. I'm going to go here. This all opened up into into a new mod section. So I'm going to reference all the things that I've added. I need everything that the data files and GPL files, game play language or something like that files, those all have to be compiled to be used by the game. So I'll be writing down whatever thing I want here. This will make it so that when I save and compile, it just writes it to this file. So it doesn't exist right now, but it will when I compile. And then, so I did that by right-clicking and adding target, I think is, what that was. Then I'll be adding sources. You want to add the data files and your GPL files. And so these are all in here like this. Your XML files, and I think CAM files, have to go in this other section. This is details about buildings that I'll be tinkering with. And so this is what this should look like, or do whatever you want with your files. But these will compile into this, and then it can use the XML files for various like stat adjustments and stuff. I'm going to save my mod. This will bring up a special type of like XML file, which essentially just tells your editor like where things are. Name it whatever you want. And then, so I've been tinkering around in, let's see if I saved this the right place. Oh, I saved it in there. So I'm going to save this in here. So now when I have this, there's this file right here, which is essentially just telling the game where things are. And you can use it in place of the editor in certain ways, but I like the editor. Pretty straightforward. I have two of these open, or I don't have two of these open, my bad. Well, I just saved it, so that's good. Anyway, your mod name, I'm going to call it like test mod 1. This is like the description for when it's in the mod menu in game. Yeah, just something unique, just to prove it. I forget exactly offhand what this is helpful for, but it's just a description. You can pick what game version you want it to be used in, whether it only loads the original files, the expansion files, or either. I think a lot of modding is way easier if you only use the expansion, because there's all sorts of really janky nonsense that happens if you try and load Southern Quest. But I like the Southern Quest, so when I've tinkered with it before, I've made it work in both. But it's a lot more work, and when you're first starting out, you probably just start in expansion. Freestyle also is expansion, for reference. So these are all in here. These are all referenced. I'm going to save my work. And so these are all the files. I already have them open in here. I'll close my preferences. And so here is the monster data file. You can find all sorts of stuff. So like once you know how various things in the game work, you can go, oh, I know how like rock golems work. They always just beeline towards your base. Well, that's a type of AI called raider. And then once you're in your IDE or whatever, you can go, well, what's a raider? These are all the different things that have raider types, and then you can go look up somewhere in here what does raider do? Oh, whatever, it's somewhere in here. And this is like some details on how that works, and you can go tinker one step at a time. But I'm going to go back to the editor. I'm going to go back to my this. You can work it in the IDE as well, but I just don't really care to. But a lot of the stuff in the game is as simple as just, well, they have a fairly robust system for how they do AI. These are various scripts for all sorts of purposes. There's lots of details on like how they work. Essentially, starting active and basic are like the most common ones. The starting one would be like as it spawns, it uses this one, something like that. Active script is like what its usual behavior is, and basic script is like what it defaults to when it runs out of other things to do. And back script is like when it's done its current task, it does this. It's not super important unless you want to get super detailed in there, and you'll find that basically every unit in here has the same 3 for these, so it's not crazy important, but it's fun to kind of tinker around with and watch the AI and see how it subtly changes. Anyway, so what I just did, let's get back to skeletons, is I made the skeletons act like minotaurs or rock golems or whatever, the units that just instantly beeline to your base and break buildings, and skeletons don't normally do that. So just as simple as this, changing the AI. Another thing I wanted to tinker with, I wanted to make, let's say embassies make units in not 30 to 50 seconds. Let's do it like 10 to 12 seconds. These could be the same number and it would still work. And so this is way faster. And then I wanted to make peasants, which I remember the word hammer off here, but peasants. So each swing currently does 4 health, and now I'm going to make it do 30 health. So every time they hit, and you hear that little audio cue, it's just going to power build the building. And this is just for multiplayer. They nerfed all the peasants. Just a whole wide range of changes. So this is way differently formatted, as you can see. But it has different information, and you kind of have to tinker around to find the specific information that you're looking for, which is why an IDE is helpful. But I wanted to make the level 1 palace, because you can find the different palaces are different files on here. For example, let's say level 1 has 1,001 health, and it has 2,000 sight range instead of 400. Saving all that. And I'm going to make all my embassies. So around here, there's all sorts of AI, or not AI, functions for how the embassy works. But I'm going to tinker with one tiny little bit of it here. So this is saying, how do you randomize what hero you want to pick? Well, it just picks a number between 1 and 16, essentially. And then here's all the different ones. If it randoms a certain number, it does this. But I'm essentially just going to comment this out and say only make gnomes, which is the odd man out here, 16. And just like one little function like that, and that can have pretty sweeping changes, just little changes here and there. It gets a lot more complicated when you want to make big functions that interact with large portions of the game, but you can make pretty sweeping changes just with little tinkering. So here I'm going to reload this so that it reloads all the files that I just messed with. Here's all the description stuff, just name. So everything looks pretty set. Here's actually, I'm going to break one thing just for an example. I'm going to take out a semicolon. You always want those. Well, you get more into that, but you can see, I'm going to reload this. This is saying, when I try and compile the file up here, that I'm missing a semicolon on line 234. And right in here, well, it's saying before this, I'm missing a semicolon. And so it'll throw all sorts of errors at you, and it won't let you do it until you compile it. And so if I don't reload it, well, mine doesn't even matter. So it did compile, and I'm going to save that. Reloading doesn't matter, I guess. Just have it So I was able to compile this. You can just hit it as many times as you want. The game's, old and computers are powerful nowadays, so it should have no problem doing this. You could compile large sections, and the mod sizes are tiny, no matter what you do. So I did a few different changes. I'm going to take Majesty. You have to close your editor. We saved everything. Just gonna do that again. Close this. You can see it closes and then it's synced instantaneously. There's like a brief flicker, but that's it loading the mod. Side note, you don't have to have everything in the entire function copied over. And it can actually cause issues. It's just what I prefer to do. You could literally just copy over, where were we? Like the one line you want to work with into a file, into a .gpl file, reference it, and call it a day, and it will work just fine. This is just sort of the way I like to do it. So I did all that, compiled, saved. Let's go boot the game. Let's start it on the other monitor. Have it windowed. So in here, you can see my test mod 1 with all my jargon after it. And it says, works with Northern expansion quests. I'm going to do this. Oops. Activate. And I'm going to do this because I set it with skeletons. And I'm going to need a level 2 palace for embassy. Yeah, that'll do it. Let's get me 30,000 gold because I'm lazy. Okay. I'm gonna cheat, I broke something somewhere along the way. I think I didn't activate it. No, I did. What I'm noticing is that the vision I gave here and the health I gave here did not save. It's because I have a level 2 palace. Okay, well, that's a pretty good explanation. So this is only palace level 1, but if I look up palace 2, it's an entirely separate building. This upgrades into palace 2, and palace 2 does not have those stats, so if I had a level 1 palace, it would actually be stronger in this case. I'm going to go back to my freestyle. Tinker with this. Cool. But I can build an embassy here, and watch how fast my peasants build this thing.
I serve with pleasure.
Your Majesty, a new building
Have my 10 to 12 second recruit time. And it should only spawn gnomes.
A new hero
There we
has
are.
arrived at the embassy,
I'm going to speed it up, and you can see
A new hero has
eventually
arrived at the embassy,
that
my liege.
The law
A new
all the
hero
skeletons in the
has
map, instead of
arrived at the
wandering
embassy,
around
my
and doing
liege.
nothing,
A new hero
they
has
should
arrived
beeline
at the
towards my
embassy,
base.
my liege.
Oh, these are rats. Doo-doo-doo-doo. There we go. And all the skeletons in this wave are just beelining and killing my base. Just a small little change, and pretty sweeping changes. And you can kind of extrapolate this out. There's a bit more interaction with lots of details, but this is a couple simple changes in how to use the editor. I'm going to go quit out. Reboot the editor, which is in Steam files. So this is all here. If I wanted to do a workshop upload, which I don't really want to go all the way with, I don't have, this is details for this, for just the workshop. It is a mod. It does not tinker with any of these things. It messes with this. Only Northern expansion rules. Cool. Set a picture however you want. You want to load in your mod files here, which is the content for the mod. We'll just have it as private, I guess. Type in whatever description you want for the mod and title it whatever you want. This is not specifically the same as this. This is a separate thing than what you want your mod titled on Steam, but make it the same, right? You go here. This is whatever changelog. Cool. There's the window at first. Anyway, but you should be able to upload from there. Oh, I think it's because my internet's weird and having trouble signing to Steam. But you need to be signed into Steam to have this work. Anyway. Random generation system editor. Okay. And that's the gist of it. There's lots of details. A good example would be like some of the way they cast spells, or let's see, overlay. You can see how some of the spells will bounce around. Like, not bounce around. For example, like here's a speed tonic from the Northern expansion, and it does all these things, has certain characteristics, but it also like calls a function when it's over. So it kind of, you can see how things navigate around. And if you want to make your own spells or own things, you're gonna have to tinker with this, and it's kind of messy, but pretty interesting. I also recommend looking through. Here's Majesty, back, workshop, content. Here's Majesty, and looking around people's things and seeing how they made something work in their functions. You can get some ideas, troubleshoot, and you can always ask questions. Let me see. I didn't show you the editor actually. I'm gonna do that, which you don't need mods or anything to do. It's just a default thing for the game. Boot it over here. Here's the debug window just going. You can see it loading all these different things. I don't have to type Revelation, but I'm going to anyway. This is shift, like basically to get to an underscore, shift minus underscore. And there's all sorts of really interesting detailed information here with the debugger, various breakpoints, which all this stuff, if you're quite adept at programming, you can probably find some good use to. But I almost entirely do one thing, which is go over to the tracking menu, click on something. You can see, here's a good example. The rat's nest is the one building on the map here. All these other animal dens are the creature spawners that are off map. And so all these creature spawners have various functions. Like this is, it's going to spawn in 112.76 seconds. It's going to spawn, whichever one I selected. It's going to spawn its spawn, which actually is not a red bear. It's a skeleton or a zombie or something like that. But there's all sorts of details on here. For really good reference, where are we? I'm going to go back to Steam. Go to Common. Find my Majesty. Go to the SDK. There's documentation in here. There's both a debugger, which is how to use that menu I was just showing you. There's a demo on how to make a quest, which you might have looked at already. This is really helpful for making quests because there's this whole UI thing. I haven't really tinkered around with that too much, but it's pretty handy. And to me, the most handy is a bunch of basically a ton of functions in here on how something works. So if I wanted to do cast a spell, here's like a spell, and there'll be details in that, the target of the spell, you know, all sorts of super useful functions. And then if this is not helpful enough, then go into your IDE and go find, you know, like, oh, these guys, they're using, like, this is not necessarily that helpful to know all this information. Like, how did they do it? Let's see. Random coordinate. You can see that the actual devs of the game used random coordinate, and then you kind of tinker with that and see how they did it and work from there. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Just hit me up in comments here on Steam, wherever, if you have any questions. Cool. Thanks.